Ruth, and we're doing chapter 4, which is the last chapter. And basically, we're going to just read the story, read the scriptures. There's a few side comments, and then we have some interesting conclusion stuff. So, George, maybe we'll take turn reading the scriptures.
Okay.
All right, and just as a quick review, we got her to the place where she communicated to Boaz that he was a near kinsman, and Boaz, as soon as he found out, Boaz was committed to exercising the right of the near kinsman, which would be to marry Ruth and provide an heir for Elimeleck's family name. Okay, so we're just, like I say, we're going to read. Do you want to start out, George, and then I'll take the next one?
Okay. Then Boaz went up to the city gate and sat down there, and behold, the near kinsman of whom Boaz had spoken was passing by. And Boaz said to him, "Come sit down here." And the man said to him, "What do you wish?" And he sat down by him. And Boaz selected 10 men of the elders of the city and seated them by him. And he said to the near kinsman, "Naomi is selling to me the parcel of land which belonged to our brother Elimeleck. And I thought to let you know and say to you, buy it in the presence of those who are seated. For I am ready to speak and to purchase it in the presence of the elders of my people who are seated. And now, if you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not redeem it, then tell me, that I may know that you will not redeem it. Then I will redeem it." And he said, "I will redeem it."
Okay, this is typical. This is the justice system in the ancient Near East, and all of the legal situations, so to speak, took place at the gate of the city, and many times even the king would sit at the gate of the city, and that's where all transactions, legal transactions that we know about, took place. So in this instance, Boaz, as soon as he found out that Ruth and Naomi were kinsmen, then he set out the very next day to get this taken care of. But as we learned about levirate marriage, it's normally the brother or the older brother, whatever. But there was a brother to Elimeleck, who technically should have been the one to marry Ruth and provide a son for her. But in this case, and Boaz knew that he was not the next one, but he went to the courts, so to speak, to and got a hold of the next one who should have done it, and that's what we have here. And notice that Boaz presented it. So Boaz was going to take over the land from Naomi, which was Elimeleck's. Okay, and he was going to take over. So that's what he put out there in front of the man who was next, who was nearest. And now that after he told him about the property and all that kind of stuff, then that next one, the nearest one, said, okay, I will redeem it. However, okay. Then Boaz said, on the day you buy the field, hold on just a moment, please. Okay. Sorry for that interruption. Now, okay. Then Boaz said, on the day you buy the field from Naomi and from Ruth, the Moabitess, the widow of the dead, you must buy it with the intention of raising the name of the dead upon his inheritance. And the near kinsman said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I damage my own inheritance. You can redeem it yourself. Because of my lack of confidence in this transaction, I cannot redeem it. Now, this was the custom in former time in Israel concerning redeeming and the exchanging of rights to redeem which confirmed transactions. A man pulled off his shoe and gave it to another. And this was the testimonial ceremony in Israel. Therefore, the near kinsman said to Boaz, buy it for yourself. And he took off his shoe. And that is what sealed the contract, the deal there, when the near kinsman took off his shoe. And so those Boaz was given clear rights to to Ruth in this instance, and Naomi. So just a little bit about shoes. Shoes symbolize inferiority. In the Gospel of Matthew, John the Baptist refers to Jesus as being greater than he, when he said, one whose shoes I am not worthy to remove. In the Near East, shoes were considered unclean. When people entered a church or mosque, they removed their shoes. Taking off one's shoes indicated relinquishing the right to acquire another woman and closed the matter. The shoes served as a reminder. Near Easterners used symbols and examples so that they would not forget their compacts and agreements. I think that should be contracts, but in this passage, it is equivalent to saying, I have washed my hands of this case. So Boaz now has the the right, according to the law, to take Ruth as his wife. Okay. All right, well, I'll go ahead and read this.
You mean okay?
Well, yeah, go ahead, George.
Okay. And Boaz said to the elders and to all the people, "You are witnesses this day that I have bought all that belong to Elimeleck and all that belong to Kalian, and from the hand of Naomi. Moreover, Ruth, the Moabites, the wife of Malion, have I taken to be my wife, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance, so that the name of the dead may not be cut off, and his remembrance may not be forgotten among his brethren and his family. You are witnesses this day." And all the people and the elders that were at the city gate answered, saying, "We are witnesses." And they blessed him and said to him, "May the Lord make this woman who is in your presence like Rachel and like Leah, for both of them built up the house of Israel. And may you do worthily in Ephrath and call its name Bethlehem."
Okay, now, just for those of you that don't know, Rachel and Leah were the mothers of the 12 tribes. And this little statement here about um, uh, making Ruth like Rachel and like Leah, it's gonna come into play when we get to the last verse here. Okay. And let your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah. And may the Lord give you an offspring from this woman. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. And when he went in unto her, the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. And the women said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a kinsman, that his name may be famous in Israel. And he shall be to you a comforter of your soul and a nourisher to your city. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons, has borne him." And Naomi took the child and laid him in her bosom and became nurse to him. And the women who were her neighbors said, "A son has been born to Naomi." And they called his name Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. Okay, now just a couple of things about this particular passage. Once again, remember I told you that they said, "Let her be like Leah, Rachel, and Leah." Well, so they've inserted here a couple more names, and again, you'll see the significance of it. Be like the house of Perez, okay, whom Tamar. Now, Tamar is another Tamar is another great story, okay? And I'll just say Tamar is the gal that um, Judah had promised her, because the first 2 people that Tamar was married to, guys, they died. Okay, and so, but he had a 3rd son, and he promised that son to Tamar, but he didn't deliver anyway. And the story goes, Tamar Tamar posed as a prostitute. She was very shrewd, and she kept his staff and his ring. Anyway, it's a great story. You might want to read it sometime. Anyway, so so that's there again for a reason. Now, note, okay, a couple other things to notice. Notice that they are always thanking the Lord. Blessed be the Lord. And then that was there before. That's what they did. And we're going to talk about that at the end too. And the other thing, Ruth gave the son to Naomi. Now, we find that a little strange. We find that unusual. But if you remember, Ruth's husband Elimeleck died, both of her sons, and she was too old to produce a male heir of her own, which is why Boaz didn't marry Naomi, because that would have normally been the case. But Boaz didn't marry Naomi because she, well, tradition had it just like today, that when you get a certain age, you don't have children. So, and that's been the crux of the whole story, and that's why she was bitter. Naomi was bitter because she had been left without any sons. And remember, the absolute worst tragic thing that could happen to a woman back in those days was number one, if she were barren, because they had no use for a woman who could not produce children. But in this case, Naomi, her children died, but she was back in the same category because she didn't have a man to support her, and she couldn't have any more children. So that was the fate of women per se. And we'll talk about divine guidance, but Ruth, that is basically, Ruth followed the divine guidance, and throughout the whole story, she was devoted to Naomi. And so by her, she had the son whom she actually gave to Naomi, but both of their inheritances, both of their predicaments at not having a man was resolved. And the only other thing about this particular passage, you notice, okay, we're doing the story, and the son was born and whatnot, but and this tells you that the Bible, I mean, these are stories, okay, and these are stories that were written after the fact. And in this case, we know it was written after the fact because at the time of this writing, at the time of this situation, um, Obed has just been born. Okay, but then it says he is the father of Jesse, the father of David, which was a few hundred years off. So anyway, that's just to it's just to emphasize that these are stories, and we emphasize the culture and whatnot. That is, we get that from something called the 7 Ps. But we're going to talk about why these Tamar, and why they mentioned Perez and whatnot. Here's the reason. So Ruth 18 through 22, and I'm not even going to read all these names, but it starts with Perez, and it is the genealogy as expressed here. But when we go to Matthew chapter 1, 3 through 6, it is basically the same, but there has been some additions. So Judah begot Perez and Zerah of his wife Tamar. So we went back here, and that's why they mentioned that, because and notice in a genealogy, women are not mentioned. I mean, it didn't matter. I mean, and actually, see, it didn't matter what woman uh, had the son. It was Boaz and the name Elimeleck that mattered, and that's all that did matter in those days. And but in the genealogy here in Matthew, it specifically says Judah begot Perez and Zerah of his wife Tamar. Why? I'm not real sure why they why they did that. But another interesting thing. So then when we come on down, and again, I'm not going to do these names, but so they get into the genealogy of Boaz, and we have Nahshon begot Salmon, Salmon begot Boaz, and they mention of his wife Rahab, another woman, okay, and then Boaz begot Obed of his wife Ruth. And then, of course, the genealogy here, I mean, that's what it is, and that's when it was written in the Gospels. Then Obed begot Jesse. Jesse begot David the king. David the king begot Solomon. Now, and once again, I don't know why the history or whatnot, but notice David the king begot Solomon of the wife of Uriah. Now, if you don't know that story is David had, okay, we're talking about Bathsheba here, okay? That was, and technically it would have said David the king begot Solomon of his wife Bathsheba, but because David had ordered Uriah killed, okay, essentially said put him out in front of the battle, because and here we go again, folks, I can't help this, because David had gotten Bathsheba pregnant. She was still married to Uriah. Now, why? I don't know, and I don't know the history behind this. But technically, I'll just tell you, this should be that Bathsheba, David the king begot Solomon of Bathsheba. Now, she was the wife of Uriah. However, if you read the scriptures, she actually, I think she actually became the wife. And remember, the first child got sick, got ill, and then she had uh, Solomon, And so I always thought that by that time she was David's wife. But just an interesting thing that goes on in the Bible, and I'm just not real sure, except the line, the keeping the male line and all that together was the biggest deal in Jewish history. And that's why um, that's why they put all that with Ruth, and then it turns up here. So okay, but what we're going to do now, thank you for your contributions. Now, um, okay, I mentioned this when the first part. I mentioned and I said, this is really a good example of what Jesus was trying to teach us about the kingdom, the counsel of God on earth, Jesus' teachings. And the more that I go over these, and the more that I study this, then it just becomes more real. So the kingdom, or we call it the kingdom, the counsel of God on earth. Remember, Jesus said, God is here now, God is present, God is among you. And we always talk about the Gospels, and talk about, well, um, uh, Jesus brought that, and he brought the knowledge of God as a spiritual kingdom and the council. He did bring that knowledge, but it was always there. God was always there, always, because God doesn't change, and God doesn't, he doesn't move or anything. So, and remember, Jesus taught from the Torah. So, so anyway, I just took these three characters here and plugged in some teachings of Jesus. Um, and one of the and I didn't spell these out, but if you remember the Beatitudes and Matthew chapter 5, the first one is, "Blessed are those who are humble, for theirs is the kingdom of God." Well, and we also talked about how Naomi, um, well, and Ruth technically, was divinely guided to leave Moab, where she was a total stranger, alone, except for her daughter-in-laws. And so we talked about that, her leaving there, and she was very humble about it. Yes, she was bitter and she was downhearted, because she had lost her two sons, her husband, and of course she had the situation of being a female, with no means of support. But so she was humble, right, and she had faith in the times of sorrow and hardship. And those those periods of faith and whatnot during the sorrow and hardship resulted in joy. I mean, it took a while, but resulted in joy, and that she has had a male heir, and technically a son, to to raise. So, and she was the example for Ruth. It was her devotion to the God of Israel, and that being her religion. It was that Ruth was inspired, and so Ruth's faith was inspired by Naomi, and so they followed the divine guidance and returned to Bethlehem. And in my mind, uh, it was divine guidance. all right, that Ruth just went to the field, did not know that that was Boaz's or whatnot. It was divine guidance. And even the idea that Ruth had, so that Ruth could go and communicate, there's no doubt in my mind that that too was divinely guided. And so Ruth was, her faith was inspired by Naomi. And I love goes with each of these. I put it under Ruth, but um, you know, love. I think I think we don't understand it sometimes, um, but it was love on all of their parts. But in particular, Boaz. Okay, um, Boaz showed great compassion for Ruth, for Naomi and Ruth's situation. And also he, he was not required. Even when Ruth told him he was a near kinsman, he wasn't required because he wasn't the next one, but he had compassion, and he went about to help them and take care of their needs. And the lesson, which we can learn this lesson from a lot of these, but during the worst and the best of times, God is always there to help us through.